What keyword ranking strategies are you currently using? The entire goal for ranking is how many orders can we possibly get through that one specific search term. Now, I know there's a lot of talk in our space around like, oh, target like long tail search variations of the keyword and all of that stuff. That does help. It's not going to have the most impact. So the most impact for any ranking keyword is going to be getting orders specifically through that search, getting a lot of orders. So we don't just want one, we want a lot. And also making sure that our click-through rate and our conversion rate are really high on those key terms. So I'll be honest with you, the biggest impact on ranking you can have is really by picking the right keywords. So if your question was, how do I figure out what keywords do I rank on? I would say like look for things that you can afford to spend a lot, i.e. you're not losing money, meaning ACoS isn't like so crazy high that you can't afford it. And you want to look for things that you have really good conversion rates. Bonus points if you have good click-through rates here, but I would go for conversion rates over click-through rates. And then you just want to like put money towards that. Now, if you say, how do I rank on this specific keyword, then that question is a little bit different. And I'm just going to tell you like push volume. Now, what I recognize is that me saying, hey, push volume through a one specific search might mean that that's not super profitable. So that's where I'm saying like the real trick is going to lie in the actual targets that you select to rank on. Other things, some pro tips and some pro hacks, are more advanced but can be helpful here, is if you have a specific search where it's like crazy expensive and you just don't really have the budget for it. Again, that goes back to keyword selection. Make sure you're selecting keywords where you can afford to spend that budget on it. But if we're on a specific keyword, you want to make sure that you're showing high enough in search that you can really get those good conversions and get those eyeballs on the product. But maybe you can't afford a ton of clicks because there's a lot of clicks and they're really expensive. Use the budget as sort of a lever to cap or meter how much money you are spending for that ranking play. Now, how effective that is going to be how many orders your market is making, and that's relative. So when I talk about trying to get a large amount of orders, it's relative to the other competition that is on that particular search. Hello and welcome back to, oops. All right, there we go. Now, hold on. My thing. Does anyone hear feedback? I'm hearing feedback, which is not great. Hold on. All right. Someone let me know. Am I hearing feedback? Are you guys hearing feedback? Or is it just me? Because if it's just me, I can totally deal with it. But okay. Sound is not clear. Good Lord. Okay. I had an issue when starting this, and unfortunately, what ended up happening is, all right. Okay. Let's see. Shoot. Okay. We are having technical issues. Give me 1 second. All right. Yeah, my goodness. This is not. All right. Hold on. Okay. This one is clear. Mic is not clear, unfortunately. Let me try something. All right. I still think, I don't know. Okay. So I'm just gonna deal with this. Let me know if this is like completely not even usable. Because if it is not even usable, that's not gonna be great. But if it's at all clear at all or you guys can hear me, just let me know. Okay, someone's saying it can't work. I'm gonna deal with this. This is insane on my end, but joys of StreamYard. It's not too great. Um, cool. So let me just dive into questions. I'll get into as much questions as it possibly could. Okay, somebody's saying it's getting better. Fingers crossed. I totally hear an echo on my end. This is insane. I'm hearing myself twice. Cool. So for our typical apparel, UK specifically, which is interesting. What percentage of PPC spend would you recommend for sponsored brand ads if the total PPC spend is 200 daily? Honestly, I would say it does depend on the performance of the product. So when you are like thinking about this, I would think about it in terms of performance. So there are general guidelines, as in, and when I'm trying to think about it, I believe roughly on average, we would say like sponsor brands typically make up about 20% of a budget, maybe 25% of a budget, and sponsor display ads often make up like 5 to 10%, depending. Oftentimes it's 5. And then that being said, when you have a budget that's $200, my question would be how many products are you advertising for that? Now, typically speaking, UK, you oftentimes have lower cost per clicks, which is like means that you can get more bang for your buck. So your $200 day budget might go a little bit farther in the UK than would like say in the US market. If you're in other like EU accounts, it probably goes even farther. That being said, I would test sponsor brands specifically. I think it's a little bit harder to get video for apparel, and we've been running some tests with trying to get AI. And AI right now, just due to some of its weirdness, it's really not super effective to do AI videos with apparel. Yeah, ideally, it will get there even with like some better models like Nano Banana and trying to like edit. Like it doesn't really get it great or spot on. So it also depends on the brand's like capabilities in terms of creatives. So I would say if you have the creatives, I would more focus on that. If you have the creatives to test the sponsor brand video, I would test that. If you don't have solid creatives for your sponsored brand ads, then I would recommend I probably would just focus in on sponsored product ads. Let me see. Okay, cool. Some people are saying hello, welcome in. Let's see. We got some other ones, some questions coming into the chat. Sorry, I got completely thrown off in the beginning of this live because like, we were having technical difficulties. Stuff is still going crazy. We're gonna work through it today. But for context, for those of you who are just joining in, if this was your first time joining the stream, hey, my name is Elizabeth Greene. The context of this is drop whatever Amazon ad questions you have into the chat. That could be on LinkedIn chat, that could be on YouTube chat, wherever you're listening in on, and I will pull those up on the screen and I will get you guys answered. So let me just answer one question, and we'll keep diving through it. The next question comes from UK Tech. He said, we're in the launching phase and on the main keyword, the spend is very high, but the sales are low and it costs us over 100%. What should we do in this case? That is a fantastic question. And let me actually pull out. So by the way, we do give away our entire launch strategy. If you haven't gotten that UK Tech, I recommend going to our website, which is junglr.com. You can go to resources and you can go to product launch strategy and you can basically steal what I have here. But let me open up the doc that you'll actually get with this. And the title page is taking a second to load. But I want to go over here to some of the bonus troubleshooting. So there's a couple problems that could happen. It sounds like your main exact keyword campaign, it may or may not be the specific keyword you should be going after in this space. It really does depend on your market and how competitive it is and what your product is and your conversion rate. So it sounds like your problem isn't this, is impressions and no clicks. Clicks with no orders, maybe, or it's a problem in converting. It sounds like it's one of those. So I would recommend revisiting your keyword list and seeing if there's something else that maybe makes more sense to go after. And I'm not sure when you say our main exact keywords campaigns, like is it all of them? Is it a couple of them? And some of it will just be the phase that you're in. So, like, when I say phase that you're in, I mean a big part of launch is that you really don't have a lot of reviews. And that's pretty typical, but that will affect your conversion rates. So, what I would recommend doing is you can use, if you are brand registered, you can use, brand metrics inside of Ad Console to get an idea of what the average conversion rate and where you are. You can also take a look at business reports now. If you look at detailed page sales and traffic by child item, you can also see average unit session percentage versus the averages in your category. And that will be a really good way to evaluate how do I stack up against the market? Because again, it could just be that the conversion rates are lower in your market, but I would want to check that. So again, reevaluate your keyword list, analyze your conversion rate versus your competitors, and see if there's ways that you can improve. And sometimes it is just a launch phase thing. So here's a question. What is the best strategy in launch phase where the keyword bids are between $4 to $5 for exact match? Good question. And this is something we deal with often because we do advertise for quite a few like supplement accounts. So I would say there's a couple things here. I'm going to pull it back to supplements. Okay. So let's say that we have a supplement that helps with a good one that I'm taking. Let's say creatine supplements, right? If you go after creatine, that's going to be really expensive, and you're not going to convert well. So basically, what your goal is to hone in on where you have the highest conversion rates, because that'll offset a higher cost per click, because it takes you less clicks on average to generate a sale, which means it's going to be cheaper, which means you're going to have better ACoS. But the other thing is, with the higher conversion rate, you'll have a better chance of ranking as well. And typically where you find that is by high specificity of the keywords. So an example here again, we'll take creatine. Okay, so then there's creatine, there's pills, there's powders, there's these. Okay, that's all of them. Maybe there's a drink out there somewhere, but like let's just niche down into that. Okay, so that's more niche. Is yours only creatine? So there's some supplements that only have creatine, or there's other ones that have like added like other types of vitamins or supplements and stuff within their supplement. So there will be oftentimes starches that are really specific to that. So I would say just hone in on things that are really specific. That's generally in terms of targeting. Now, the other thing that you want to do is just make sure you're being very intentional with your tests. Now, you should always be intentional with your tests, but if you have like low cost per clicks, you can afford to do a lot more testing and a lot more aggressive testing. And so in the supplement space, what we have found to be very important is, or in high cost per click spaces in general, not just supplements, because there's other ones like beauty category and there's some other crazy ones out there that can get really high. You want to make sure that you're doing limited batch testing. Limited batch testing, what I mean by that is you like say I go and find 100 keywords, right? And I'm like, oh, all of these are super specific. I think these could work really well. I don't want to go aggressively after all of those because again, if I'm paying $4 to $5 a click, $4 to $5 a click times 100 different tests is $400 with only me on, assuming I'm getting a click on every single one, right? That's crazy. That's a lot of budget, and you're not going to get any meaningful data from that because you just can't afford to. So what we would do is pick a subsection of that again, through doing intense keyword research, we've been using and loving Data Dive recently for that. You really hone in on the ones that are really specific, and then you test those, and then you, as quickly as possibly can, understand if those keywords work well for the product, or if they don't work well for the product, i.e., do I convert or do I not? what is my conversion rate, and then you keep the ones that are working really well, and then you cut the losers. The other pro tip that we've tested, and I would be careful with this, but I would test it, is there are some high CPC categories that what we did is we were scaling, because sometimes what happens in these high cost per click categories is that even though you put a bid of $4 or $5, it's a real struggle to gain impressions. And then you're like, I don't really want to pay $8 per click. So I don't really want to scale my bids really high. But at the same time, I need to be able to test those keywords to get stuck between a rock and a hard place. One of the things that the team tested is they tested using dynamic uploading. So we still put a high fee. It's still like $3 or $4 are kind of the max that we allowed, but instead of increasing the bid, all we did was increase. We changed it to dynamic up and down bidding, and that did get us to start getting impressions and clicks. And on average, I don't think we paid as high as we would have needed to have pushed bids to be able to generate those impressions and get that data feedback. So that's another tip. So between all of those things, I would test it. Let me know how it goes. All right. Second question is, how do we prepare for upcoming Prime Day? That is a great question. So basically, the idea of Prime Day is that you want to max. Actually, I think I have. It's not a really well laid out. I need to update this guide because it's a little bit thin. It doesn't look as good, but I have this guide here. So basically, before you want to start planning, so a couple things here in terms of planning. My recommendation is to identify the strategy that you want to execute on Prime Day. Strategy being, are we just strictly going after profits, or are we using this as a scaling measure? Now, obviously, cost per click can get higher, so you want to be careful of that. But I would get, like, again, budgets, products that you're focused on, and you really want to hone in. So if your goal is to accelerate sales, you might increase your total A cost targets, or you might say, like, hey, on these specific areas of the account, I'm going to go a little bit harder. And that will play back into what budgets am I going to use. For a lot of our accounts this year, to like, hey, we're not running deals and we're going after profitability. That means we need to be very careful with the budget we're setting and how aggressively we're going after things. So again, you want to basically have your goals in front of you, identify what it is that you need to execute on Prime Day, and then make sure that all of your strategies are wrapped towards that from a product level as well as an account level. Then if you can, I would go back and analyze last year's data. If you have it, if it's a new account, you can kind of look at search trends and things. But you want to understand kind of when does the peak start happening? How does this account react? For some accounts, they're not really huge Prime Day accounts. Like, maybe a little bit more niche, like, medical items, certain equipment. If it's like a yard sign, like we've advertised with accounts, like, hey, it's not a big Prime Day thing. There again, you need to be careful because if you are just expecting every single account to go crazy on Prime Day, they're not all going to do that. So you don't want to be like over pushing on ads because that's your expectation. So you just need to make sure, again, you're analyzing and understanding where you need to position yourself. Then a main part of this is cleaning up the ad structure. I would not be launching a ton of campaigns and be like, oh, I have to get all these campaigns up because of Prime Day. You should have had those up like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks at max. So you want to make sure if you have a whole bunch of variations for products and they're like grouped in, you want to make sure that you're pausing underperforming SKUs, adding negative keywords, pausing if there's dormant campaigns, you want to set budget caps. You just want to go in there and clean up the structure. One huge one I recommend to everybody is to go and do what I call a bid reset. Go into your targeting tab, look for over the last 30 days, last 60 days. So filter for keywords and targets with 0 impressions that are in active campaigns and ad groups, and simply sort the bid column highest to lowest. What you need to find out is, do I have a bid that I got set crazy high because it's just not triggering and I haven't already caught it? You wanna go ahead and catch that and make sure, when I say bid reset, is just reset it to a normal level. Like, if your average CPC is like $1 and say these bids are not even getting any impressions, but what happens on Prime Day due to the increase in traffic, a lot of things that haven't previously triggered can trigger. Also, you want to look at things like placements. You want to look at things like bidding strategies. Again, all of these things that are triggering, that may not kind of run away from you on a normal day, oftentimes will run away from you on Prime Day. So you're basically doing a full sweep of the account to determine if there's any issues. So from there, um, during Prime Day, in our experience, the biggest thing to do is to increase budgets, not necessarily increase bids. Now, there are maybe some specific key campaigns we wanna make sure that we're being aggressive on, but for the most part, we will monitor budgets day of. We are checking the account multiple times a day, morning, evening, noon. We're just keeping on top of it. We also set up a budget alert system for ourselves. This is like, "Hey, this stuff is out of budget," right? Please check it. So I recommend prioritizing our budget increase of bids. Um, and then here's a pro tip. If you're using an account level cap, you can calculate your budget increases, and then what you can do is kind of divide it by 2 or 3 if you wanna go crazy, but we found 2 to be good. And then simply what you do is you add that additional budget, half of it in the morning, and then you wait, and then you add the additional budget later in the day. So you're kind of, it's not really day parting, but you're making sure that you have extra budget towards the end of the day. And on occasion, you can manually check your ad placements. Again, I would only do this for priority products, and for ones that you want to make sure you keep on track of. Another pro tip here is I would take all of your campaigns that you want to make sure you absolutely need to pay attention to. So you might have like ranking campaigns, you might have a specific product that's really important. You're like, oh wow, I want to make sure my low bid autos always have budget throughout the day, or something, whatever it is that you've identified. The easiest thing to do is to take all of those and put those in a portfolio, because you don't, like, if a campaign that historically has had, like 60% ACoS and your account level ACoS is like 30, 35, you don't necessarily want to add additional budget to that campaign, even if it runs out, right? So you want to be very, very intentional with what you are doing. But what we've done, are analyzing the account and you're kind of preemptively identifying those campaigns that you really need to make sure you maximize the visibility of during Prime Day, then if you put those in a portfolio, then instead of going into the account and saying like, "Oh, wow, these are all out of budget," you can simply click onto that portfolio and then you view all of your priority campaigns. Although if you have those in segmented product campaigns, again, keep a record of where they were. And then after, it's simply doing potentially reset of the account. Again, this is a lot easier if you're focused on budgets, less on bid, but you definitely want to be keeping an archive. My favorite way of archiving is through a bulk file of what you were doing before Prime Day increases. Know what your bids were prior. It makes it a little bit easier, unless you have a software or something you can revert stuff. Then that may work well. Cool. Okay, saying hello, happy Thursday. Hello, hello. All right. Hello, hello to you as well. What would you suggest for newbies to stand out in the Amazon PPC and make progress for the company? Good question. I would focus in on 2 things. You want to understand data analytics, more specifically data analytics on how do the numbers relate to client goals. That is the biggest thing. So an example would be, let's say that the client wants to, classic, like increase sales, but let's say they're more focused on profitability. So my understanding of data analytics tells me, oh, okay, if they're more focused on profitability, then my total ACoS is the main KPI, because they understand data analytics and how that relates to spend and sales, right? And then more thoroughly, if I understand data analytics and I know that total ACoS is ad spend and total sales, then I know I need to either grow total sales or decrease ad spend. And then I go down the rabbit hole of, okay, if as an ad manager, my main thing that I can focus on is ad spend, then I can understand, okay, what does my ad spend need to be? What does the growth need to be? If I uncover waste in the account, I can understand how much do I need to push, how much can I push, how much do I need to pull back? And that's all because I can understand how those root action items relate to the larger thing as a whole. And when it's the biggest thing that I can tell you is when it comes to account improvement, listen and ask questions when it comes to client goals. That is the biggest thing. I can't tell you how many, like, we actually were onboarding an account now. It's a clothing brand, and they recently acquired this brand, and someone has been running it for a really long time. One of the products has a 2% total A cost. Insane, right? It's one of the, I think it's the third bestseller. And so obviously maybe to an account manager, they would say like, oh my gosh, look, I'm getting this client a 2% total A cost. This is fantastic. Well, this client wants to aggressively scale, which we're going to do, and I'm super excited for that. But like 2% total A cost is in complete antithesis of the goal of scale. And so while it may be, quote, good optimization or maybe look good, that's in direct opposition to what it is that the client goals are. And so that is not actually a good number. And so again, you need to understand those relations so you can like push forward and understand what is the best ad strategy to get us where we need to go, because where we need to go is going to be completely different for any other account. And then I would say it's not exactly ad um, an advertising specific skill, but I would absolutely, I tell everybody, my biggest recommendation, if you're going to work in the agency world, now if you're working on your own account, it doesn't really matter because there's one of you. But if you are in any form or fashion on a team or interact with humans at all or have to understand things, you really need to work on the skill of communication. Communication is two-way. So communication is understanding and being able to thoroughly grasp what it is the other person is asking or requesting or saying. And when there is not clarity on something, you absolutely need to get clarity. And then also being able to communicate your understanding and also your like how you attack that problem. I think a lot of the biggest breakdowns in people just not getting the right results for the account or not executing a lot of the correct strategies really comes down to either an analytics disconnect or a misunderstanding of how to understand the analytics, what strategies need to be executed given what you're seeing in analytics. And two, um, not being able to really communicate and collaborate on those things. So if you are good at those two things, you are going to be miles ahead of everyone. Hello to you as well. Which again, quick brief, if you are joining in here, if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the comments wherever you are listening in. I will pull it up and we will give you answers to your advertising questions. All right, question is, during Prime Day, is it better to advertise less, lowering bids, or keep them the same and adding a nice Prime Day deal, 10 to 20%? Or is it better to increase bids with no deal at all? We have little margin. Good question. I would recommend discounting works really well on Prime Day. If you have any sort of badge, any sort of discount, if you do that, I would definitely do that over increasing bids. And then I would mostly focus in on budget management. And I wouldn't, you were asking about adding a deal or lowering bids. I wouldn't lower bids for your main things that are performing well, but you definitely want to run through and do optimization for anything that is running like higher A costs or just unprofitable. You definitely do want to optimize that. But in terms of like your regular ads, if you're like everything's good day to day, I wouldn't go through and like massively decrease anything. Can you please share your updated Q4 strategy with us? We want to know what changes or approaches are you focusing in on this year act? actually, let me put this in the chat. I am giving away our Q4 playbook now. So I'll drop it in the chat, which by the way, if you're listening in on LinkedIn, you won't be able to get it. But it is this, it's basically a case study that we built into a strategy. Yes, we did 4x Q4 margins on a brand. Um, and we have been running this strategy a lot, and we found it to be um, really, this is how you make sure you get profitable. And this year, because we have Fall Prime Day kind of flows into Q4. So what we found going through this playbook, um, really what we found the trick is to making sure you get profit. So there's this idea um, that I've seen floating around the community. It's been shared, but nobody tested it. At least to my knowledge, I haven't seen anyone like run a real solid test. And the one thing we do at our agency is like I never just put out theories of strategy. Or if I have a theory on strategy, I will always tell you, okay, given my understanding, this is what I would test, but it's not something that like we specifically tested. If I ever put out a playbook, a strategy, anything, it is because we have tested it. Now, again, not all tests, like not everything works 100% of the time, always and forever, but we typically what we do is we have a theory, we test it, and then when we have a successful test, we'll roll it out to multiple accounts. This is one that we had a successful test and we roll it out to multiple accounts, so I can tell you with confidence that this is a solid Q4 strategy. Basically, what we found is there's this theory out there, which again, I don't know why people say it because it's not true, is that even if there's an off season, the idea is okay, maybe seasonality isn't here, maybe for whatever reason, like we have a lull, like we know that the good times are coming. So the idea was, hey, we should push aggressively before the season hits so we can make sure that we have really strong rankings and then, profits will catch up. Well, we found that that theory is false. All that does is destroy profits. So when we ran the analysis, what we found is if you take a look at this sales graph, so this blue one is sales, and you take a look at the search volume increases, your sales, no matter how hard you push on advertising, pretty much will always mirror shopper trends. And it is virtually impossible to fight market trends with advertising, at least on Amazon. Now, if we're talking about like external traffic platforms where you're generating demand, that's different. Amazon ads on platform, again, I'm not talking DSP, we can talk DSP, new to brand, all that cool stuff. But when we're talking Amazon PPC, it does not generate shopper demand, it simply captures it. And so if you don't have any shopper demand and yet you're pushing to try and capture the little tiny puddle that is, you will always push an account into unprofitability. You can't fight the market. So this is basically what we found. So here you can see that our spend starts to increase as consumer demand increase. And that's really the one major thing that we found is hypercritical. We can go over the playbook because there's like checklists and stuff. So again, if you want to get it, I would go to junglr.com/Q4 playbook is where it is. Or if you guys can't find it, feel free to go to our website. I've been telling everyone, I'm like, hey, there should, I guess there's not. Oh, there was. Sometimes there's a little question thing in the corner. You can always use that, or feel free to reach out to me on social channels. Do you know why they've removed the sponsored icon on sponsored product ads? Have they? That's interesting. Let me test that. Sometimes I don't think they did. No, I mean I'm not seeing it. So they are running tests. But from what I see, I'm still seeing sponsored on the sponsored product placement. Sometimes there's certain browsers that will block things, or there are some times where they'll change something. However, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on it because I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that would be, like, against government regulation. Like, you have to disclose if something is advertising. So there always has to be some display of advertising. Most likely, it was either, like, something in your browser that was blocking it. Um, that is a possibility. I have seen that. Would it be a spend waste if we continue PPC before now and Prime Day, or is it better to reduce spend a bit for now? So I wouldn't completely pause advertising. I would probably reduce budgets. By the way, like, the numbers over the next couple days and on Monday are going to be absolute crap, by the way. Like, they're not going to be good, so don't expect anything. So if anything, I would just restrict budgets a little bit, allowing for things to run out, but I wouldn't pull back too hard. What are the top 3 things to do immediately after Prime Day? Good question. Okay. Um, so actually let me pull up the Q4 demand one because there's a really good post. All right, let me pull this one up. So after high traffic, no, wait, that's high traffic. All right, so post-traffic cleanup, which we, in this case, talking like late December, January, but you could replicate this playbook after Prime Day. So the goal is to protect margins as demand falls off. You want to scale down budgets without cutting off profitable sales. So this is honestly the stage that I've seen most people go wrong. Actually, by the way, if you have a bidding software, this is where most of the bidding softwares go wrong because oftentimes they're looking at a longer look back window when numbers were great and they don't catch like real time things like very well. So here are the 2 things that you need to do. So I would drop ad spend on weak campaigns. This is pausing high cost per click, zero sale keywords, or high ACoS campaigns. You can also use the dollar budget method, which is not we call it a soft pause, which is essentially setting the budget to $1, so there's no kind of running, and not completely paused. I would do that if you determine that you probably want to run those long term, but they're just not looking now. And then I would cut back budgets on lower order cannot speak today. Cut back budgets on lower order, high ACoS campaigns. Pro tip here, I would use a shorter look back window. So I would look like at last 3 to 7 days or like yesterday's data. Typically speaking, I don't like short date ranges for making optimizations. Again, I'm saying 3 to 7 days here because this is after like whole Q4. But you could look at like last 2 days, like yesterday's data. I just want to know, where is the bleeding happening? And again, you don't want to hyper react to like 1 day of data, but at least it shows you where stuff is bleeding. And you do want to keep profitable stragglers. There will be some budgets that have good target ACoS, are still working, people are still buying. So you definitely want to make sure that those are on. And I would lower budgets gradually on campaigns with more orders. So if you have a campaign that typically is like a really high performer and maybe ACoS has gone up, but like the orders are still coming in, be very careful with like aggressively cutting those back. Again, because overcorrecting is a danger here. So there's a danger of not correcting at all, but there's also a danger of overcorrecting. So you really want to balance that and looking at shorter look back windows, and prioritizing things that are still driving a lot of orders, will help you help you navigate that. Hey, Elizabeth, what are the 3 most important advertising strategies you use in a launch? I would say the main one, the biggest one is understanding the market. Keyword research is the crux of good advertising launches because your top SEO keywords will not always be your top advertising keywords. The other thing that you need to do when it comes to like keyword research for product launches is also understanding the budget of the launch. So an example would be like, let's say we have like we work with some, 7, 8-figure brands. They have really strong catalogs, they have really strong cash flow, and they're like, hey, look, I can completely run I wanna be aggressive with this, and I totally understand that this product is probably gonna be a launch, like, at a loss for 2 months, and I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with losing X amount of dollars. Great. Nothing wrong with that, nothing right with that either. It's just that's the dynamic in the strategy. We need to understand that to understand, again, keyword research and how we need to go about that and how we're gonna execute that launch. Flip side, you have a brand that's like, "Hey, I got X, Y, Z budget. We gotta be really intentional with this." And so in those cases, you need to be, again, very, very specific with what you're targeting. So I'd say keyword research, and then, um, I like like exact match single keyword campaigns. I'll show you this. So on our launch strategy, we have a whole, like, launch sequence. I would say biggest my biggest strategy on that, and I say my again, any strategies that I share with you guys are time like, they are tested, and they're ones that we use ourselves and have developed. So the one is you really want to make sure that you're going after impressions in the beginning, and the other thing is on launch, you don't have to get top of search placement. I know, it's wild and controversial, but it's true. If you are showing up on page 1 at least or somewhere, all we're looking at is, are we getting impressions and are those impressions translated to clicks? I know I'm gonna get naysayers that are like, "Well, it depends if we're getting clicks, if we're, on product pages versus top of search or rest of search, and are we." I don't care. I use those things as troubleshooting metrics if we're having issues and things aren't converting, then I'm going in to troubleshoot those things. All I care about, am I getting eyeballs on the product? Are those eyeballs translating to clicks? And when they click, am I getting an order? That's all I'm evaluating. So I would say be very specific and understand what you're evaluating. Don't overthink it. Use those incremental data points and like nitty-gritty detail in the weeds stuff to troubleshoot and fix issues that you're seeing on the top end. But if you obsess over like in the weeds metrics, you will always miss the forest for the trees. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm focusing on all this stuff, and here's this incremental like we're looking at this and this and this and this." And then I go look at the account. I'm like, "Hey, bro, this top line thing that like just look at this because you're completely screwing up the most important thing." So I would say don't overthink it. Just push bids to the point where you are getting um, push bids to the point where you're getting impressions and clicks, and then once you have that evaluated, then you start scaling up your budget because you already know that you have the bids needed to get eyeballs and clicks on the product. And then you can start scaling them to get more aggressive and try and push on things. But really in the beginning, I would say my biggest tip is it's about evaluating where your product fits and where it converts in the market. That's really what we're evaluating, and it's not always going to be my first targets that I pick. Like, sometimes it is, ideally it is, but it's not always, and so if all you're focused on is, like, these are my high search volume keywords, like, that's where everybody focuses. These are my high search volume keywords. This is what like, it's not. I'm telling you, it's like, there is overlap, but there's not always overlap, and so what you really need to do, focus in on where the product converts because oftentimes it doesn't convert on the top level keywords and all you're gonna be doing is just burning money when you could have been taking that insight, working to find something that does convert and then working your way up the ladder in the market. That's really what you need to do. Because in the beginning, you're not gonna have reviews. You might have a little bit higher price and maybe you're still figuring out where to price the product. There's a lot of moving pieces. Maybe your listing isn't as good as you thought it was. There's reevaluation to do there. There's a lot of things that we think are solid that are not always solid when we start getting the data. What I would say is that Amazon Ads is the biggest and most underutilized feedback loop on product performance, like bar none. If you're getting in front of the right audience and you're not converting, it's a product market fit thing. It's not an ads thing. And so if you are not working with, like, if you're not doing this on your own account, if you're not working with an agency that's gonna give you this feedback loop, like, you need to have someone who's gonna take a look at the advertising and be able to give you insights on how you can improve the product or product performance based on the insights of advertising. Like, that is, like, looking at where it's working, looking at root words that are converting, all of that stuff is so freaking important and will help you get much, much better as a seller. And if you're a freelancer, agency, like, if you can do that, that will 110% improve. Again, if anyone wants the Q4 playbook, it's junglr.com/Q4 playbook. Feel free to go ahead and get that. Or if you want to get the launch document, I forget what it's called. It's junglr.com/A-to-Z product launch. I can type that one on the screen in case anyone wants to get that. But hopefully, between those couple resources, I would say that's definitely going to be helpful for you guys. Yeah, junglr.com. What's this one? Yeah, AZ product launch is the other one. Awesome. Thanks for your answer. I appreciate it. Yeah, hopefully it was helpful. Again, a lot of things I find viewing Amazon advertising through the lens of shoppers. Oh my gosh, talk about this. I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole. But AMC insights from like Amazon Marketing Cloud insights into consumer behavior and shopper behavior, I'm telling you right now, is the next level future of Amazon advertising. Now, that was always something that was evaluated when doing DSP ads, building audiences, analyzing consumer behavior. Those insights, I'm telling you right now, if you are able to dig into and understand those, you are going to be so much more effective and efficient at running Amazon advertising going into 2026. Like, there are some wild, insane insights that we've been pulling out. There's some again, I don't put out anything unless I've tested it. So there are some case studies I'm running right now. I'm foolishly excited for the results of those. We will see if and when in the future. At the very least, if it doesn't work out, I'll let you know. But really, I would say for those of you, because AMC should be showing up in your ad consoles now. It's going to be rolled out to everybody. It's not in everybody's ad console yet, but if you do get access to it, I would highly recommend going through. And as we develop things like specific queries and other stuff, we'll make sure to share that with everybody as well. With that, it looks like I flew through most of the questions today. I'll probably give you a couple more seconds. I know the mic's been weird and some other stuff has been weird. So if anyone has any last questions, drop it in the chat. Otherwise, I might end a second early so I can stop listening to myself having a reverb on my mic system. But other than that, no, I really appreciate it. There's been some fantastic questions today. You guys are awesome as always. And with that, I really appreciate everyone joining in. Solid questions. Hopefully I was able to give you some solid answers. And I will see you guys all same time, same place next week. I look forward to answering more of your Amazon ad questions. You can get more out of your advertising without having to sacrifice profit. And that wraps up this episode of the Ask Junglr Amazon Advertising Podcast. I hope you found these insights and strategies helpful in your Amazon PPC journey. Remember, if you have a burning Amazon ad question that you'd like answers to, head over to junglr.com/live to join our next live Q&A session. Until next time, keep optimizing those ads and stay hungry.